Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Welcome to this week's edition of the SAP Fiori-side chat. We're again very excited to have you with us. My name is Eugen Winschel from the SAP UX product management team, and I'm joined by my co-host Keith Fisher this morning. Hi.
Good morning.
And today's topic for the Fiori-side chat is SAP Fiori for mobile. And to make it really interactive, today we have invited a great round of experts for a panel discussion. That means great conversations and a real-time Q&A. Today we have with us Bill Clark, Santosh Kikari, Kunal Mehta, Kevin Musick, and Stan Stadelman. Welcome, guys. And to make it truly interactive, we invite all of you to ask questions and comment during the conversation. And before we get started, a few ground rules, and over to you, Keith, for that.
Yeah, so we're introducing something new today. So in the spirit of actually extra audience participation, we have a poll right here. And what we'd like to do is ask you, if you could, maybe on your mobile device, go ahead to www.menti.com and use this code. And we actually have some audience participation that's available that you can use to share a little bit about yourselves, because we always like to know who the audience is. And if you take a moment here as I introduce the rest, you can go ahead and put in your title, and this way we can kind of get a sense of who you are. If your title's longer than 50 characters, then we'll truncate you. But in the spirit of fun, go ahead and feel free to enter this in if possible. There we go. We get some advocates. We have Chief Cloud Architect. We love to see this activity. So while people are entering in and figuring out this tool, some ground rules, right? We are all talking about SAP technologies, right? And we're passionate about it, and we'll have some very vigorous discussions. We ask that you go ahead and focus really on the topic at hand. Try not to use it for selling any other products or services. And we're not trying to sell you anything either. You'll notice down, if you're not familiar with Zoom, along that control bar at the bottom, that there's an area for Q&A, and you can answer questions that we'll get to as we go through the conversation, as well as there's a chat window that's available that will get you on the right, and feel free to introduce yourself there and go ahead and use that for any other commentary you'd like to provide. So with that, we're just going to give a few more seconds here as these things come up, and I'm really thrilled as we're going forward to introduce Bill Clark, right? And Bill Clark has re-entered and returned to SAP, and welcome Bill. And he brings with his re-entry to SAP a perspective on the market about how mobile has been more pervasive, how it's kind of broadened itself in the enterprise software market, and really interesting to hear, maybe to start, what your feeling is, Bill, about what's happening with the market and how it's changed. So why don't you go ahead and take over?
Okay, thank you, Keith. So so I just came back to SAP in February of this year to head up strategy around our UX and Mobile Center of Excellence. And coming back in, it's really exciting to look at some themes that seem to be pulling together, and those themes are things like hyper automation. So AI and machine learning are the buzz in the tech industry. Tend to be up there as a top search term, along with things like blockchain, and those are causing disruption in the overall set of business processes, and in that, it usually causes an industry or an organization to rethink everything from end to end, and that's where mobile, being the last mile, comes in. And in fact, looking at Gartner's top 10 technology trends for 2020, really every one of them has a touch point with mobile. There's the people-centric side of it with multi-experience, whether it's chatbots and conversational platforms, augmentation, where you get into wearables, has a certain flavor of mobile. And then over in smart spaces, which is another one of their themes that are coming together, they basically catalog 5 of the trends as people-centric, 5 of them as smart space centric. You think about the use cases that we all have in smart spaces, starting with things that are commonplace now, like your automobile. You know, the fact that your device, your mobile phone, pairs with the automobile to give you a different experience in the cab, depending on your preferences, is just kind of a baseline. And we see in enterprises and in industries that extrapolating into the various work scenarios that are out there. So that's really what's exciting, is coming back in and seeing mobile being pervasive again in all the top trends, and really looking forward to this panel. So I'll turn it back over to you, Keith, to kind of tee up the framework for our discussion overall.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, you know, that's fascinating, particularly on, you know, the introduction here really of the smart spaces, right? I think we all hear about AI or advanced technologies, and we're still kind of putting those together and bringing them together as a unified, you know, model, or something that people can identify with, right? We don't necessarily talk about smart spaces that much, at least from a community perspective. So really interested in getting into that more. I wanted to take a moment actually to get into and introducing Santosh Kakeri. You know, Santosh, we've been doing a lot of, you know, work here of, you know, on the SAP Fiori-side for mobile, and where does, you know, SAP Fiori fit into mobile and this broader strategy? Very interested from your perspective, kind of what you're seeing out there.
First of all, thank you so much, you know, Keith, for inviting me into the panel. Very excited to be part of it and talk about Fiori Mobile, Fiori for iOS, Android, together with the other panelists. As you can see on my screen, Fiori Design System has been there for quite some time. It's evolved since 2012, and Fiori Design System really provides consistent user experience for you know, all of the different you know, device types, be it Fiori for web, native experiences, or conversational UX. And if you're really looking to unleash the true native mobile capabilities, like, you know, building offline scenarios, taking advantage of augmented reality, core machine learning on the device, or even sensors, then, you know, developing native applications would be a wise choice for you. And here, SAP really kind of, you know, provides like few different technologies and options. You can build native applications taking advantage of the SAP Cloud Platform's SDKs we have for iOS and Android. If you're looking to get like true native performance, I think this is kind of, you know, the way to go about taking really advantage of all of the you know, sensors and so on. And then there is another framework, SAP Mobile Development Kit, right? So here it's a low-code, cross-platform, metadata-driven development. It's kind of, you know, good for apps that require significant and frequent customization. So it's like, you know, you can maintain single, you know, code base and run it on both iOS and Android platforms. And I saw that, you know, we have few developers, front-end developers and designers that have kind of, you know, really joined the call. So I'd like to kind of, you know, quickly show some of the resources that we have here, right? So you have the design guidelines. You can go to experience.sap.com. You can find all of the information, all of the best practices to really kind of, you know, get started, right? So, and then we also provide something called as a sketch stencil. Designers can relate to it. They can download, and they could open the sketch stencils and really kind of, you know, get started. We provide all of the UI components as building blocks, and they can really kind of, you know, start, you know, building or designing applications by really taking advantage of it. Maybe one last thing, this is something that you can see on my screen here. It's an iPad application that's available on App Store. You can go today and download. It's a Fiori Mentor iPad application. And here you can simply browse for all of the components that are available. And for example, here, let me open OCR scanner, right? So, and then let me try to share my, let me try to scan my business card here. Right, so as you can see here, we are providing the building blocks, and I was able to quickly scan my address. And not only that, you know, you can really kind of, you know, export the code into Xcode. As we have Stan, you know, he can really talk about, all of the technology that kind of runs behind the scenes. But this is kind of a great way. So we do provide like a lot of good resources for developers and designers that are out there looking to design great enterprise iOS experiences and integrating really with backend systems.
So Santosh, I wanted to actually take a moment to introduce Kunal, who's actually representing the asset mobile, asset management mobile piece here. So Kunal, having heard from Bill and Santosh, you being responsible for delivering the mobile experience for asset manager, what is your perspective of how mobile is really driving your category, your app, and then how do you actually embrace the technologies that we have here at SAP to deliver those solutions?
Yeah, thanks a lot for actually firstly inviting me in this panel. So as Santosh said, right, SAP has several technologies that it provides for developing native mobile applications. There is Fiori for iOS SDK, iOS and Android SDKs. There is MDK. So I'm the product owner for applications that are in the enterprise asset management space. And in this category, in this enterprise asset management, you have customers that are looking for applications which are highly customizable. This is because the asset management area follows a different business process for every customer. There is not a one-size-fits-all application that you can develop. Now, when you're talking about highly customizable apps, highly extensible apps, then native is one way to go about it, just with pure SDKs. But going with MDK or mobile development kit approach, that is a metadata-based approach that our apps are built on, provides this ability to create these applications that are highly customizable and extensible. I'm hoping that during the course of this talk, I'll be able to give a short demo of the applications that we have, particularly the Asset Manager application, which runs on both iOS and Android, as well as I'll be able to show or highlight a little bit of the MDK platform that allows you to develop these applications in a highly effective way through metadata-based approach using a WYSIWYG kind of editor. So that's the idea that that we use, our approach, but the point that we have to understand here is that native does provide the best user experience, right? At least in my opinion, I would say. And in that sense, using MDK as a metadata-based approach, you're not sacrificing any of that, because under the hoods, it's still making use of the iOS and Android Fiori SDKs. So that's the point that is the most important when someone tries to see which mobile development approach he's going to take. So so I don't have anything to share right now. I'll hand it over back to Keith, but during the rest of the session, maybe I'll get an opportunity to show some of those apps.
Yes, so maybe kicking this back to Bill for just a moment. I mean, Bill, when customers are beginning to kind of consider their approach, their strategy around delivering, mobile applications, is there a specific mindset that they should start with? Are they trends that people, need to be thinking about? Are they, do you try to do a one-size-fit-all approach for all the apps in an enterprise, or what do you recommend?
So I think number one piece of advice I would have is to start with a multi-experience mindset. So, in the industry, there's been over time an evolution towards mobile first or mobile only in terms of the mindset around user experience. And that kind of came into vogue about 5 years ago. We started hearing mobile first and that evolved. And certainly you should question that and say, if I'm designing a workflow, maybe the only avenue is through either a mobile web app, a PWA, or even something simpler than that. But really, to get the big picture in mind, you really need to think about multi-experience, and that definition is everything to do with voice, with gestures, and I use that example that we're all pretty familiar with, just the simple Bluetooth pairing, of your device to your car for your voice calls and for your entertainment and things like that. Navigation, included in that. So it's this multi-experience mindset that I think bodes well towards you providing your customers with the kinds of experiences that are well thought out. And again, where mobile's so important is most of those modalities are used more on mobile than anywhere else. So if you look at the statistics around how many searches that Google fields, a few years ago, that was trending 55, 60%. I think it's a little bit higher than that right now. So that's definitely one aspect of things. And just a reminder, you see up here, if folks could use the Menti app, it's interesting. It's a pretty even split here. We'll keep this up for a while between which development platforms you're currently using. But that's, the multi-experience is one piece. The other piece of advice would be, of course, think end to end. So it's, we've done a lot of work at SAP around guided outcomes and the intelligent enterprise, and think about end to end in the context of you're not just optimizing the experience for one role in an organization, you have to think about all the different roles. So if you take retail, for example, you have the front of the store or point of sale, you have the consumer experience with your brand even before they shop at your store. Nowadays with COVID-19, the rage in retail is around curbside pickup. So now that's, all these things are inherently mobile. It would be nice if you're sitting out there in the parking lot, not to have to call the store to find out if your order's ready. If you had a ready-made app there that is ready to go. And in fact, back on the idea of multi-experience, one aspect of multi-experience is multimodality. So something as simple as you integrate not just thinking in terms of, is it a native app versus a web app, but also what about just simple text? So you orchestrate that, because you don't need to log into the app, just you're waiting on the text. So in the back-end system and in how you design the overall experience, keep it simple whenever you can. If that's all it is a notification, then why make the user have to go into the context of the application at all? So we've got some great minds on the call here. Some haven't spoken yet on how to do that. So maybe I'll throw it back open in terms of the how for any of my colleagues.
And thank you, Bill. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think this is a great time to introduce, Stan, obviously representing the cloud platform and the iOS SDK, as well as, Kevin as a developer advocate, from your perspectives, as people are trying to kind of figure out how and where to get started. Obviously, there's maybe a bias specifically around iOS because it's so pervasive. But what else are we really, trying to have customers consider as they get started? So maybe I'll turn that over to you first, Kevin, and then maybe Stan, you can kind of follow up.
I mean, when it comes to the decision of what kind of technology you go for when you build a mobile app, you got to first have a use case, right? You want to think about your mobile use case, because this is like your initial thought of starting to get an app, to start building an app, right? And then really think about the use case. Think about who's using the app later on. What is the app supposed to do? Is the user using the app all day long? Because this is like his main tool, like a salesperson, for example, who has like all his sales stuff on his iPad, for example. Like those kind of things are important if you make a decision when it comes to what kind of technology you want to use, in my opinion, because I think native, like pure native iOS or Android development or MDK gives you the best experience because those technologies are built for that platform. If you look at hybrid technologies, they're great for smaller use cases, right? Things users go in and out like really quick and just gotta like hit a button or do like a simple workflow. But if you're a worker and you want to work all day with that device and with that app, or even like an end consumer, I'm just thinking about couple of famous apps I'm using in my private life, not shouting out any names, but there are native apps in between them, but also hybrid apps. And to be honest, when I'm using them a lot, I just feel better with the native app. It works better, it refreshes better, it scrolls better, those kind of things. But yeah, I think I would make it use case centric, and then decide towards what technology I would go.
Okay. Well, we obviously have a lot of people interested in the technologies that we do deliver, and so maybe from your perspective, Stan, maybe give a little bit of an update from your side, what's happening on the in terms of the SDK, what things might be coming, how you introduce Fiori for iOS to customers and partners and developers.
Yeah, I mean, Fiori for iOS is really fundamentally a productivity tool in my eyes. It's a design first approach to the development process that really enables the customer and partner designers to go through the user research and kind of define the scenarios, which we've all kind of done the design thinking thing where we're going from rough wireframes into the high fidelity wireframes that Santosh was sharing earlier in Sketch. This is a really typical iOS development process. And from the SDK technology side, we then have shipped user interface components, extending UIKit, which is the standard iOS user interface framework. Now we're moving into SwiftUI, which I'll get into in a moment there. But it's really designed to take those high fidelity wireframes and then one-to-one allow you to implement those screens really rapidly. So from that aspect, the SDK is really about reducing development timelines and increasing ROI and productivity there. In terms of capabilities of the SDK, this has really kind of been an exciting year for us. We tend to kind of pin our cycle to the WWDC and iOS release cycles. And last year, Apple really dumped a ton of technology into the community with SwiftUI, Combine, and it's really quite funny because SwiftUI really wiped out what would have been the massive announcement, which was Catalyst. And Catalyst is really intriguing, I think, in the SAP context, because what they strategically were doing was saying, look, we have 1 million active iOS developers. We have 10 million on the platform. Let's say, I don't know, let's say we're at an order of magnitude fewer for macOS application development, because AppKit just did not get that same pervasive kind of developer mind share. But so many of the other foundational frameworks were common. So all of your text rendering, all of your kind of computational foundational cores, very similar between iOS and the NS stack. So Catalyst was really kind of a brilliant approach of saying, okay, let's take all of this UI experience and bring those to be native macOS app developers. So from the SAP SDK perspective, we were already on that wave. So earlier in February, we shipped support for Catalyst in the 5.0 version of the SDK. And that was kind of a big deal for us. I saw about half the callers right now are iOS, Fiori for iOS developers. And so you may have noticed we ended up dropping support for iOS 12 a little bit earlier than we normally would have on the new branch. And this allowed us to immediately start to adopt SwiftUI and Combine. So this is a really big thing. So we're kind of going through this really exciting transformation of beginning to develop new components with SwiftUI and Combine, supporting Catalyst. And then we also launched an open source project today on SAP GitHub that maybe we can go into a little bit more detail in a moment. That is about SwiftUI implementations of some integration cards and chart components that are kind of common to UI5 and also to iOS development. So it's a really exciting time for us to kind of be on the cutting edge of the iOS developer experience.
Right, and so And thank you for that. So just for the neophytes out there, what's the value proposition specifically around Catalyst that kind of got a little bit overshot here? What's for people just kind of wandering into this?
So Swift UI is cross-platform UI development also.
Okay. All right. So that brings another scale to the question that's kind of showing up a little bit in the chat here, is like, what are the trade-offs here in terms of native versus mobile? Is native going to cost more, even though it might be more conducive to the experience, right? And so I think these are the struggles and the trade-offs, and maybe and considering all of these options. And I think going back to Kevin a little bit, is like MDK comes up as well, right? So now we talk about MDK, Swift UI, Fiori for iOS, right? Fiori for Android. Where should I start if I want to get ahead of the curve while I'm in my planning phase, right? And maybe Kevin, if you have an opportunity to kind of demonstrate that, I'm not sure if any of you guys have a chance to show, a way to visualize that, right? And certainly interested to Stan, to come back to the Swift UI piece, right, in the open source project, because I think that would be very interesting to our audience. So maybe I'll start with you, Kevin, and what would you again recommend here for people who want to plan out here, maybe 6 months, 12 months down the road, and what are the trade-offs?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now, and it's there's the question about budget centric rather than use case centric. I mean, if you leave UX out of the whole math thing, then of course, yeah, budget is a thing, right? It's always a little bit cheaper to have a couple of web developers put together something for web which runs in a browser. But I'm talking about UX, right? About those hardcore power users who have to use this device with that app all day long. I mean, you want them to work productively, right? So you want an app which is reliable, not crashing, refreshes fine, probably offline available, which is possible with our SDK as MDK and mobile services. So all those kind of things you want to consider when making a decision on what technology you use. And if you really kind of expand your budget a little bit to go towards the better UX. But if budget is really a thing, I mean those web technologies, I've never really got deep into the web-based apps, but they're not bad. Like, I mean, there are web technologies out there which are made really, really well, but the people who develop those apps are web developer geniuses, right? Those are not like people who just came from university and started building web apps. I mean, those are guys who really know what they're doing, because you got to consider a lot of things, browser caching and all sorts of things, like how to connect to the local device functionalities and things like that, how to implement it properly. How do I structure the app architecturally to later have it easier to maintain it and debug it? Because, like, I mean, you got to debug it in the browser, but it runs on a phone later. So it's all a little bit more complicated. So you really, really need experts on that. And back then, when Swift first got introduced, Swift developers, their salary were skyrocket, right? So nobody really could afford them, except with big companies. But nowadays, like, the Swift developers come straight out of university. The same with the Android developers, right? So I don't know. I'm not like a business person or salesperson, so I don't know about like the budget stuff too much. But I would say consider UX if you can, right? Because it's really, really important to increase productivity with your end users later on. If you think about getting started, if you have a project in your head, just as I said, think about a use case. If you want to try out different technologies, I mean, we at SAP, we have like a huge database full of tutorials and learning materials you can go to and check out different technologies there, try them out. And I mean, there are tutorials in there where you can do like an hour of MDK, you can do an hour of the iOS SDK, Android, and then you get like an overview of what's going on there. But in the end, it's really like I can just say not enough. It's like, what is best for your user? I'm trying to push that outside of SAP when I talk to a lot of people all the time. What is best for your user? Like, we're living in the 21st century where if you develop an app, it has to be competitive with the stuff which is in the App Store. I mean, even in the business world, people expect apps on an iPhone or an Android device to look good. And how you do it doesn't matter, right? As long as they behave good, behave well, they perform well, and they're usable. I mean, there's no limit to what kind of technology you can use. If you can build something amazing with React, hey, go for it. I mean,
Keith, if I may, I'd like to kind of add on to what Kevin said. If you really kind of think about like product experience, for example, you have YouTube. It's a classic example, right? So you can of course run YouTube on your Safari or Chrome web browser, or you can also download the native app from the App Store or Android store. It's just the experience. It's so much more different when you use the native application. And also, I think the studies have shown that people are retained more if they are on the native applications. So you have better recommendations, people are hooked onto it. And I think oftentimes our consumers behaviors also kind of help us develop the overall product experience. For example, if our customer is a e-commerce shopping e-commerce shop, think about how much of sales you can deliver from an e-commerce website if it were to be purely run on a web browser, or if it were to be run on a native mobile app. Because you can offer so much more within the native mobile, the experience that you can offer, you might kind of end up having higher retention rate, and also you might kind of build the basket more just with the native experience. Yeah, some things to consider when you're really kind of deciding whether to kind of go with native or go with some of the mobile web technologies that are out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think all of our customers are struggling with those trade-offs, right? About, I mean, as was said, we have so many different technologies that can explore, that could be used, right? That decision process about, what I should prioritize, right? What trade-offs I can make in advance of getting into the specific development platform still seems like an opportunity, Bill, that we can work on, right, to guide people through a mobile app development experience, right? To take in those business considerations and experience considerations that often we miss if we're just diving right into a technology or a platform.
Right. So let me jump on that. And there's actually a great thread going on in the chat. And as I'm going to talk about the warehouse and some ideas around WebDyn Pro and things like that. And then for those of you on, feel free to tee up other topics or questions that you have. So let's tackle this interesting question. Go ahead and I'll summarize the chat. So the question is, for years, the standard for many organizations in a warehouse is to use the old brick kind of RF devices for things like pick, pack, and ship, as an example. And so if you go into some of those warehouses now, it feels like that the state of the art is a green screen, right? It's a terminal that looks like it was designed in 1988. And there's some practical reasons for that. For example, some warehouses are very difficult RF environments. And so you'll find that the kiosks that are being used, the terminals that are being used are hardwired. And then kind of the next step up from that, you have the ruggedized devices and the bricks and things that are being used. So of course, everybody would like to everyone in the consumer lives are using Android, iOS devices, great Windows tablets and things. And so they're becoming accustomed to that. And as time goes on, that disparity becomes more noticeable. So there's different ways to tackle that. One of the ways, and we address this with the MDK, is that you can have this metadata approach that then runs across the ruggedized devices. We're looking at the Windows devices, support for the more advanced Windows devices, iOS and Android. And so then you get kind of the write once, run everywhere, which is actually my first stint at Gartner was 2002, and that was the coverage area that I inherited. Was around, at that point, wireless application gateways, and that evolved into multi-channel access gateways, and then finally into MADPs, mobile app development platforms, and now that's evolved into MXDP, multi-experience development platforms. And what's interesting is the core problem is still the same one from 2002. We're now in 18 years later, which is kind of the right once, run everywhere, scale, give as good of a experience as you possibly can. It goes back into the fit and function into a warehouse. So for example, if it's a rough environment, there's a couple of ways to handle it. If you're using the iOS or Android or some kind of tablet, you probably end up with something that has to be ruggedized. And so that's what we're looking at going forward, is the continuing evolution of that whole market, including the Windows 10 devices. So that's one angle, right? The other angle looking forward is, how do you stair step into this? So it's not native or web, it's how do I get started? Because one saying that goes around that has stuck with me is, the best mobile app is no mobile app. If you can sidestep the need to write any kind of mobile app by leveraging another channel like text, then do it, right? And there's some airlines, if you look across the CRM systems of various airlines, I find that some of the ones that are more simplistic and bare bones actually work better than the ones who are too elaborate, who got too fancy with their applications. So as you stair step into this, one of the things that's been evolving the last 4 or 5 years is citizen development. So to Kevin's point, just doing a web app is difficult in itself and requires you to be pretty sharp if you're going to do it right. So that's where you start to back off and look at low code, you look at citizen development, and you look at how do you get to that first rung, and then let the business model pull it along. If it really makes sense to do the most sophisticated, integrative, native application, and I'll use Warehouse, and then I think I see a few other comments coming in. I'll use Warehouse as an example. One that we've had for years at SAP with some partners are smart glasses in the warehouse. So again, I'll do the pick, pack, and ship. So if you are a warehouse worker and you've been assigned to go pull some things from inventory, having these smart glasses on, you look and it will actually show you the bin that you're supposed to go pick out of, right? And so then you get into what I mentioned before, which is the multi-experience aspect of things and the use cases. So one that we ran into, which is an interesting challenge, it can be overcome, but you have to be careful about your process, is what if you are wearing the smart glasses, but you're also a forklift driver? So as a warehouse, as the owner of the warehouse, you don't want to be liable if your driver was distracted by their smart glasses and they had an accident with a forklift. So that's where the use case and the thinking and the process and the experience is important. But those are the kinds of things that we're looking at in terms of drilling into the use cases. So it's really stair stepping in with tools. And I'll mention one more genre of tools. If you look at the backlog of applications and mobile applications in the world, and this is centered a little bit more on general application backlog. If you're a traditional enterprise or IT shop, you are swamped, and that has prompted, in the last 4 or 5 years, this huge rise of robotic process automation. And when I began my remarks around hyper automation, RPA is like a godsend to the business owners, because they're used to be asking for applications and mobile apps from their development staff for years and from their partners, and they're stuck. And so RPA unlocks that, and it's inelegant. Some of the user experience isn't the greatest thing that you'll ever see, but it's better than nothing. And so if I were to create the stair-step diagram, it'd be RPA, citizen development, rudimentary web developers, mobile web developers, native mobile app developers, metadata approaches. And the cool thing I find coming back into SAP is we support all of that. We have everything in the portfolio for doing that.
So yeah, and thank you, Bill. So maybe to kind of loop in the guys who are really kind of thinking about this from from an application perspective. Kunal, I'm not sure from an asset manager, how you how you're taking all of these possibilities out there and building a strategy around them. And then I'm very interested then from Stan and Santosh's standpoint, what can we provide, right, to help customers, more rapidly adapt and and implement some of these use cases, which are generally big shiny objects out there, right? I mean, having the smart glasses is great, but what can I do today? So maybe we could start, Kunal, from your perspective, and Stan and Santosh, maybe what we could do to help.
Sure. So we've heard today a lot of discussions or ideas on how users or how customers can choose what mobile platform to use. There are various technologies that are out there. So I just want to show what we have used for our applications. That is the mobile development kit, and how you don't need to compromise the native look and feel, but at the same time make it extensible using the metadata platform. So I just want to share the screen real quick. And okay, so here you see the asset manager application, which is written in a mobile development kit. And it is deployed, it is totally metadata based, and it is deployed on both iOS, which you see the iOS tablet, and the Android tablet. Exact same code, exact same metadata, deployed on both devices, write once, run everywhere kind of concept. Everywhere in this case is iOS and Android. And hopefully in future, Windows may come in. We'll see about that. But everything that you see here, nothing is web, nothing is using any kind of a UI view or a web view in case of Android. It is using the basic iOS Fiori for iOS native controls. So you can see the look and feel. So I can go to one of the equipment, the charts and everything that you see over here. It's all native look and feel. Exact same experience when I go to to Android. Everything is exactly the same. You see the same data, same experience. And the point being that you don't need to compromise in this at all. You can do it both ways. Again, just to do a quick overview of the underlying technology, the MDK technology that we've been talking about a lot, as to why it can be used for a business expert, if you will, or a business analyst, and he can do it as well. I'm just going to switch to another screen where I'm going to show the toolkit that is used, which is on the Web IDE on the SAP Cloud Platform. So here you see an application, which is the same asset manager application. You have all the metadata that is required for it. You have the WYSIWYG editor, which shows the map on top, and then the high priority orders and so on and so forth, all the sections that you can drag and drop. You can drag an action bar item from here. You can add an item. You can change the appearance of that item, change the text of that item, and deploy it straight away. No need to build an IPA, no need to build an APK. You deploy your metadata on the cloud platform and gets updated on the client. So that's the beauty of this technology. And again, you're not using any web technologies here. Still using the Fiori SDK. Only difference is that everything gets interpreted at a runtime and the pages get loaded at runtime. And that's the only thing. So it does, when you're thinking about the cost and the skill set required, the skill set is definitely a lot less as opposed to a native iOS developer, where you really require a highly skilled developer to create these applications. Again, these are not simple 1, 2, 3 click applications. This particular asset manager application, to give you a perspective, it has over 150 screens. So to build an application with over 150 screens is not a joke, and is not something that that can be taken, very easily. So that's what the customers, enterprise customers that we've seen, are looking for. And when you have such a big application, of course, it is not a one-size-fits-all. So every customer wants to customize it, and the toolkit provides you the way to customize it as much as you can. So this is something that seriously customers we've seen really take into consideration when they choose this the platform that they choose for development. That's some perspective from my side, from based on the conversations that I've had with the customers and our user base.
Yeah, if I could concur with that, I mean, the MDK, to come back to Keith's question from several minutes ago, as Kunal's saying, so the MDK is a metadata layer that's built on top of the Fiori for iOS SDK and the Android Fiori for Android SDK respectively. So if you're running this application, this is a native application. These are native UI table view cells, FUI object table view cells, headers, charts, etc. And that's really, as he says, critical in terms of the application performance, because we would not be writing a web application that supported this scale of offline transactions that was able to perform at this level. That's just not feasible. We've tried it in previous generations of various SDKs, and that's just not realistic. The question about the development is I think really interesting, and I think it speaks to there not being a one-size-fits-all principle here. From the way that I talk about the native iOS SDK, is we wrote this SDK to make it really easy to consume SAP content for iOS developers. And I think that principle kind of captures a lot of the thinking that went into the tooling, which is to say that we developed it to feel intuitive for an iOS developer. The extensions to UIKit exposed the same properties and attributes that a UIKit developer is expecting. The networking stack extends URL session to add support for SAML and OAuth and etc. that an iOS developer is familiar with URL session. So all those, and that was absolutely critical for us for having this be a successful product, was this had to be accessible and feasible for an expert iOS developer. And from there, then what we've seen over the past couple of years is we're now working back into the center of the SAP ecosystem. And so the metadata approach has a couple different characteristics. For Kunal's team, for me, this makes a lot of sense because it allows the SAP Asset Manager application team to develop one application that is then easily configurable by customers without re-implementing source code or modifying source code. And that is a core capability of an SAP application that we're publishing through the App Store, and also making available directly to customers for more detailed configuration. And so we see some partners that have kind of that same use case where you want to be able to write once and then configure. So write 70%, 80%, and then customize to the particular customer use case. We also have partners that are iOS shops that are writing native iOS apps. In my mind, I think the developer community is a really critical aspect of the partnership with Apple, because we really do talk about millions of iOS developers, so having that ability to scale all those developer resources in the community, I think, is a big deal, and that's kind of, I think, one of the differentiating factors versus third-party proprietary cross-platform tools. I'm seeing this question from Keith about the open source project. So our main targets for this open source project is really, again, to be able to access both the iOS developer community, where really in the outside SAP world, open source is the lingua franca of iOS development. I mean, third-party projects like AF Networking, React, SwiftRx, like these have been just core to the community for the past decade. And with the kind of success of UI5 in the open source community and also the Elements projects, it was really natural for us to take the opportunity to start to move our development into the open source community. And we're starting just at the UI layer, and we're going to continue to ship the native frameworks through the developer trial site and through the repositories.sap.ondemand. You know, we want to get more and more into the open source community because it will allow us to interact more with developers directly. And while the SAP, I think, will still continue to do the vast majority of the development, we're happy to collaborate with contributions and handle pull requests. The scope of this project that we're launching is in 2 submodules. One is in charting. So the SDK has a number of charts out of, yeah, that's right, has a number of charts out of a product we acquired, Roamby, a few years ago.
Know them well, yeah.
Yeah, and so we've been embedding Roamby Chart Kit in the Fiori for iOS SDK in the SAP Fiori framework. After some internal reorganizations, the resources got reallocated for that. And we had a number of features that we wanted to be able to add in terms of, you know, pinch to zoom and pan and developing new charts. And it just made a lot more sense for us to go Swift UI. And so we are putting that implementation in the open source community. And we are backfilling to support the existing set of charts that are already supported by Roamby and also adding new ones as we go. These will be actually shipped as part of SAP Fiori as well, and developers can then also use them for their own projects.
Yeah. So when does that all kick? When does that all kick off? I mean, what's the
timeline? So that project went public an hour ago.
Wow.
Yes. So this is the announcement. So it is hosted on SAP GitHub, GitHub/SAP. I guess I'll put it in the chat.
In the chat. That'd be great. Yeah.
So Keith, just to kind of close the loop on what's real and what's available today, Kunal kind of showed as an example of a 150 screen application. I just want to show what resources are available today, so that customers can really take advantage of some of the sketch design tools that we provide, so that they could actually design those 150 screens applications, or even if they are having more than one application, how can they make sure that those 2 applications are consistent, right? So you can really kind of take advantage of these UI components or the building blocks. So we provide sketch stencils for all of the commonly used components. So for example, they can kind of play with some of the UI components that we provide, also take advantage of the patterns, right? So for example, onboarding flows, they don't have to kind of create those onboarding flow for each and every application. And there are a bunch of icons that they can choose from the icon library. Just an example. We also kind of provide guidance on color, on how to use colors for light mode as well as dark mode. I think in the WWDC last year, Apple kind of announced support for the dark mode in iOS 13. So we also have provided some examples, how they can really kind of take advantage of some of the best practices while designing for dark modes. And finally, we've also started supporting SF symbols, another announcement from WWDC. So by the way, all of these design components that I'm sharing with you are available in the SDK. SAP IT, which is one of our largest customers, producing number of Fiori applications for our large workforce, have reported that by taking advantage of the resources that we have provided with the sketch stencils, with the Fiori mentor application and the SDK, they're able to accelerate their design and development process and save 30 to 40% of their design and development time. So I think this is a great testimonial that we've kind of got from our own internal customers.
Great, thank you, Santosh. And we are at the close of time here. So what I'd like to do is actually first congratulate Stan on that announcement. You heard it first here on the Fiori-side chat. I wanted to throw open this whole area of what we want to talk about next. I mean, there's such a wide breadth of discussion here today. Feel free to go back out to the Menti and throw in some of the mobile topics that you'd like covered. We have questions still in the chat. and maybe we'll take a quick look at those. But I think at this point, maybe maybe Bill, to kind of wrap up what this is, and talk. We've gotten a lot here about the future. What's next? Right? What else should we be considering? What can we expect from SAP as all of these things start to roll out?
Yeah, so one thing, what's next, I'll answer in that we're planning to have one of these Fiori-side chats where I will again participate to give an update on the overall mobile strategy. We're working our way across various groups and consolidating some roadmap information and some vision about what's coming. So that's tentatively slated for maybe somewhere around mid-June, maybe a little bit before. There may be some other topics that we bring in around mobile in this format before then as well. So that's, we really just want to hear from you as to what you're seeing and what you'd like us to dig into. And I see a couple of things coming in on-device machine learning with, Apple broke some new ground there. We can certainly talk about that. We have some things we're looking at in that area. Launchpad, I think there was just some new stuff. In fact, wasn't that the topic of the
last week? Yes.
Last week, yeah. So coming
back
back
into the library for that one.
Yeah, coming back around that.
Back to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I hope we can bring all of everyone on the line here back. I think it'd be great maybe to have a best practices Fiori-side chat. So for example, and I'll just pick on one of the, I think this was in the regular Q&A, someone saying, how do you achieve some better outcomes with Fiori, avoid data loss when the infrastructure and network, I assume, is not there consistently, and then handle race conditions where you have two users trying to update the same record. We can talk about that, and we talked about the stair step of all the different trade-offs. There's certainly best practices that support no matter how you develop your app and what the core architecture is. There's some good practices around that, and you have the folks on the line here to share some of those practices. So that might be a good future topic for all of us, is just to come back and share best practices.
Right.
But yeah, lots of great fodder.
Hey Bill, can I just throw something in here real quick?
Sure.
For the topic on on-device machine learning, if you're interested in that, go to developers.sap.com, and there's a multi-tutorial series I've written for TechEd last year. It's updated to the newest SDK version, so just go through that. And next time we chat about that, you probably have a good basic knowledge and we can have a good conversation.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, Eugen, we've come to a quick end to an hour, so maybe you want to kind of close and.
Yes, first of all, thanks a lot for great conversation today, like lots of stuff that we heard about, and I think there is so many more questions we couldn't actually cover today that we will definitely take for one of the next sessions to come. So first of all, thanks a lot to the panelists. It was great having you on board this week, and see you very soon again from what I see here on the future topics. And then for the next week's session, actually, we have a panel on SAP Fiori 3. So obviously the new updated version of SAP Fiori. So we wanted to invite you to discuss that with us as well. And if you missed any of the previous sessions and you would like to hear, for example, we just saw like Fiori Launchpad, you can actually go on our wiki that actually has the links to the YouTube videos that we record and listen into those sessions. And otherwise, I would say thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. And
thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, appreciate it.
See you very soon again.
All right.
Thank you for having
us,
us.
everyone.
Next week.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.